Hi, my name is Mark Widmann. I'm the NHS Creative Director. I'm here at the Skate Warehouse crew. I'm going to show you guys the NHS Skate Museum. We built this in 2013 to celebrate the 40th anniversary of NHS. So this is the first section of the museum. This is basically talking about what Richard Novak, Doug Hout, and Jay Sherman, which is the NHS, were doing in the late 60s. They're just surfing, having a good time. They had a little shop on 41st Avenue, which is still a skateboard shop to this day, called the Boardroom. They were cutting pultruded fiberglass, which is this really strong material that they would use to cut camper shells or any kind of like industrial usage you might need. They could cut it for you and make it. They had their friend, their surf buddy in Hawaii. His name was Jimmy Hoffman. He asked them in 1973 if he could cut some skateboards out of this pultruded fiberglass, get some components and make completes and send them off to Jimmy. They said, sure, we could do that. So they cut some boards, sent them off to Jimmy. They sold really fast. Jimmy came back for another order of 500 boards. They banged those out. They made their first Santa Cruz flyer here with their friend Jim Phillips, made some art, made the first flyer, and that kind of started them in the skateboard industry. So after those guys built their first 1,000 skateboards, they're in the skateboard business, so they started a skateboard team. At the time, everything was really like localized, so if you lived in Santa Cruz, it was your Santa Cruz team. If you lived in Santa Barbara, it was a Santa Barbara team. So this is the Santa Cruz team here. This is John Hudson, he's the team captain. This is Tim Pimarda. He's actually the longest running employee here at NHS. He still works here today. He runs the R&D department. These are the original team shirts from that time. This is John's, Hudson's actual shirt. They were airbrushed by the local airbrush artists down at the boardwalk here in town. And they would go around and do different demos, different schools, here in Santa Cruz and Aptos and all the local areas. And this was their very first Santa Cruz ad in Skateboarding magazine. So they have Santa Cruz skateboards going, and right about 74, 75, a big thing happened to skateboarding, and that was the urethane wheel. Changed skateboarding. NHS jumped on the idea of producing Road Rider wheels, which was Road Rider 2s, 4s, 6s. They made riser pads. This is the original first Road Rider right here. Changed skateboarding, faster, you turned better. They're using clay or metal wheels before that, so this was a huge game changer at the time. So not only did they have Santa Cruz skateboards going, but they also now have Road Rider wheels. So once again, they have to like talk to their buddy Jim Phillips. Hey, we want a logo. We're gonna start a brand. This is their very first ad here. This was Jim's first Road Rider wheel shirt. I was told this was modeled after his wife, Dolly. But soon after that, he came up with the idea of the winged wheel, and that became the logo pretty quickly. T-shirts, patches, more ads, all the second generation Santa Cruz boards came complete with Road Rider wheels actually on them. So they were selling completes with their decks, with their wheels. Road Rider wheels took off in a big way, and I'll kind of explain why that was at the time. The big thing I think happened for them was that they kind of built an industry idea of not just having these localized teams of like the best in your area. They wanted the best riders from all the areas to build like a super team. So they would have your Tony Alves, they would have your Logans, they would have all your Jay Adams, they had all the best riders at the time to make a super team, which is kind of like the foundation of what the industry is today. So here we have multiple examples of different boards with Road Riders on it. You got the Z-Flex J, you got the Logan Earth Ski with the Road Riders on it. This is actually one of the local shop owners, Build Wheels, his board right here. It's pretty sick. But it changed the industry quickly, and with the invention of the urethane wheel and then again the sealed bearing, they sold millions of these wheels. They took that money and invested back into Santa Cruz skateboards and into the idea of making a distribution company. Skateboarding was taking off at the time, and they wanted to have a house where you could buy everything for skateboarding, from pads to decks to wheels to trucks, and that's what they did. So the reason that the precision bearing was so important at the time was back in the day you either had clay and metal wheels with these loose ball bearing components were about 23 pieces. So you take the bolt off and they spill on the ground. It makes it really hard to change your wheels. With the sealed bearing inside the Road Rider wheels, this is only 4 components. So you can easily take this wheel off, no mess. You can pop a new wheel on, smaller, bigger wheel, whatever you're riding for the day. If you're going downhilling, skating in the pool, it made it really easy to change your components. And they sold road riders with the sealed bearings in them. So you could buy the wheel and bearing components all as a unit. So the 70s was all about going fast. And Santa Cruz had definitely some of the top riders in that time period. There weren't a lot of contests going on in the late 70s, so in the true kind of DIY fashion of skateboarding, they put on their own contests. Whether it was Catalina or Capitola Classic, they had a contest in Akron, all over the US. This is an actual flyer done by Jim Phillips for the Catalina Classic. This was the first nationally televised skateboarding event on CBS Sports that happened in the late 70s, I think it was 77. They had Mike Goldman, which was actually his leathers that he would wear while downhilling. He actually just wore these a few years ago, again down at Laguna Seca. We brought these back out of the museum so he could put them back on and race one more time with those on. Different artifacts here, just from that time period. It was all about going fast, and Santa Cruz dominated at that point. People like Bob DeNike, Judy Oyama, who still competes to this day, was doing her thing. Here's some original art from the Capitola Classic. There's multiple of those events that happened here in town. So this is the section dedicated to John Hudson. He was the fastest man on a skateboard alive until 1991. He had the record. He went 53.4 miles per hour at Signal Hill. He had his signature hut tuck move, and this is where you can get your photo taken here in the museum. Doing the hut tuck, you gotta get really down in there. This is also his original board from that event. It's a honeycomb board, especially made for him, with these special urethane wheels that are gigantic, and the pitch of the trucks are interesting as well. So at this time, NHS and Santa Cruz was trying to find their identity. They needed a logo. They built a distribution house, and that kind of leads us into the next section of the museum. So this section is kind of talking about Santa Cruz Skateboards before they had a logo. They were trying lots of different things. This is a team jersey. They would do some burn logos that actually almost burnt down their building. At one point, they stopped doing that. They were using the strip. They had a logo called the Space Boy. That was about 75. They tried to do that one, which is a fun one. And the big one was they actually were going to sign Tony Alba at one point, and they prematurely made stickers with TA actually on it, and the deal never happened. So there's stacks of these laying around the building because couldn't go anywhere with them. But it's an interesting time. There was no classic dot. There was no strip logo. They were kind of looking for an identity, and they go back to their old surf buddy Jim Phillips, and they ask him to come up with a Santa Cruz logo. So these are some of the original sketches from Jim. A couple different versions. There's the classic SC, which you probably recognize. Some strip versions here. They finally come to the idea of this lettering, which is in the strip form here. He also does a round dot with a strip in it. The story goes that Jay Sherman liked this. He'd asked Jim to basically break it apart and stack it, which became the classic Santa Cruz logo here. And with that, so now they have a logo, and they have a distribution house, and they actually become an official company. They have letterhead, they got their first strike-offs, they got business cards, and they start a distribution house, and they start a whole line of trucks, decks, wheels, pads, helmets, anything you need for skateboarding, they were selling. And now they're kind of focused on innovation in skateboarding, and they're trying all different kinds of things, from graphite loaded decks, different shapes, block tails, a little bit of kick tails. They were doing their first rebound truck. They were trying to do a truck at the time too, as well as having a wheel and a deck brand. Downhill skateboarding was still dominating skateboarding, but it was slowly moving into skate parks. They were popping up everywhere. Lots of parks over the hill in San Jose and the Bay Area. So with all the skate parks popping up, Santa Cruz had teams at every skate park. They had the best riders from every park. And one of the best riders they had was Steve Olson. He was voted, I think, best all-around skateboarder in 1979. This is actually his board he won one of his contests on. He had a short company called Molly, which actually had pads in the hips. Him and his dad owned that company. He dominated in skateboarding in both downhill and pool skating at a time when pool skating really took off. And it happened really quickly, and it happened really quickly due to one of the droughts we had here in California, where they had to drain all the pools. And skateboards went from being long and skinny and fast overnight to being big, what they called pigs. You could turn, you had more foot space on there. it changed really quickly. And Steve definitely was one of the dudes that transitioned from both downhill into pool skating pretty effortlessly. He was one of the major players. So with the explosion of skate parks and backyard pools and no actual organized contest, in true NHS form, they formed their own contest series called the Hester Series from '78 and '79. That was the first time anybody had ever seen independent trucks. All the riders who placed in the top 10 were all independent riders. It was basically the birth of an icon. So with the founding of independent trucks, there were two different things happening in Northern California. There was NHS, which was kind of developing their own independent swing arm trucks here. And there was the guys from Ermico, which were doing their own kind of independent suspension truck, which is called the Stroker. They were mostly doing downhill speed cars at the time, and these guys were just skateboarding strictly. So they're kind of running their own games separately, unbeknownst to about each other, and they actually met at Signal Hill. Ermico guys were racing their downhill stroker car, and these guys actually, Santa Cruz guys actually had riders that were riding. They realized that they both were from Northern California, and they joined forces to make the first NHS truck, which is called the Rebound truck, which has 2 points of contact. You can adjust it, and it has 4 cushions. Wasn't the best truck in the world. At the same time, there was Tracker and Bennett, which were not the best trucks in the world as well. So they kind of took what was best from all 3 of these trucks to form a new independent truck. They had the swing arm truck for downhill racing, and they had the set axle truck for pool skating. So they had 2 different trucks going at the same time. This was the production, very limited production of the swing arm truck for downhill racing, and this is the real full production set axle independent truck from 1978. So they got their truck figured out. They got this amazing team. So Santa Cruz and NHS goes back to their friend Jim Phillips and asks them to create a logo for them. So these are some of Jim's early sketches here. You kind of see he went through all kinds of phases, and it eventually landed on this version. And this comes from the Time Magazine cover of 1977. There's the picture of Pope John Paul on the cover, and on his robes he has these crosses that go all the way down his robe, and that's supposedly where Jim got the inspiration for the logo. So with that, so now they have the truck, they got the team, they got the logo, they started making all kinds of different products, and of course the stages here from stage 1 all the way to stage 11. Always kind of stayed true to the same math, so the same turning, same geometry. The big change, I think, in Indies was stage 5s. Not only were they anodized and colored, but they hollow bodied out the actual truck, which made it lighter, but still just as durable. Probably one of the most sought after stages, I think, at one point was the stage 5s. But with the truck being as good as it really was about the team as well, and it was really important for teams and team riders to get an ad in Thrasher. A lot of these guys would say that they would get the Thrasher in the mail, they'd look at see who was on the cover, and they would instantly look and see who got the Indy ad. It was a really big deal, so it was super important for these guys. So this wall is all dedicated to the Indy ad. Back in the day, in the late 70s, early 80s, you didn't have any other outlet. The magazine was your only outlet for skateboarding to learn what was going on in the world. So, like I said earlier, most of these guys, it's like you got the magazine, like who was on the cover, who got the inside Indy ad. That was super important. And this is just a fun section to sit here and listen to these guys talk about what their ads meant to them, what their favorite ads were. What it meant to get an ad in the magazine was super huge. So this is just a cool section to sit here and listen to these guys in their own words kind of tell what it meant to them. So this section kind of talks about the boom of skateboarding and the death of skateboarding, because it happened pretty much overnight. Everybody started building skate parks. It became like this really gimmicky thing. They had like these pinball games. You could like take your kid to the mall, drop them off at the skate park, and go do your shopping and come back, pick them up. But the parks weren't built very well. The equipment wasn't built very well. People started getting hurt. It became a real liability. And literally 6 months, it became a complete liability. Parks closed down everywhere. Skateboarder Magazine stopped being a magazine and became Action Now, like literally overnight. Went from August to September, you got your Action Now, which basically like lumped everything together. Surfing, biking, skating, anything that wasn't a mainstream sport went into Action Now. So skateboarding died. It became like a huge liability. No one wanted to touch it. Parks were closing. Kids stopped skating. And NHS was at the brink of kind of closing itself. A lot of companies fell off and closed right about that time. but luckily Novak was kind of smart enough to buy raw material by the kind of truckload, like whether it's planks or whatever it was that he got. And they came up with an idea to keep the company open by starting a complete board for $49.95 called the Jammer. If you ask a lot of the pros from the middle to late 80s what their first board was, it was the Jammer. It was a good board, had Indy trucks on it, had OJ wheels on it, and it was all for $49.95. It was a great board at a great price. And they sold a lot of those. That's what kept NHS alive, was the Jammer during those dark days. To reignite the flame of skateboarding, they knew they had to do something, so they kind of went to their friend Ed Riggins and Kevin Thrasher, and they knew they had to start like a magazine, needed an outlet or a face for skateboarding. So they formed Thrasher Magazine in 1981. These are the first 12 issues here. It seemed to work because skateboarding started to pick up again and started to take off, and with that, NHS started to pick up and take off as well. So with skateboarding taking off and NHS taking off, they went back to their old friend Jim Phillips and asked him to do graphics for him full-time. Jim Phillips started a studio in his backyard of his house and pretty much worked for NHS full-time doing graphics, ads, everything NHS. Some of the first original graphics here, like the Dragon, the Bee, the Stinger board. Jim was really good at giving people personalities. So like, for example, for Dwayne Peters, he would have the Hazard stripes. For Olsen, he'd have the checkerboard. And it really kind of culminates here with the Rob Roscoe 1 board, and then the iterations after that, the 2, the 3, the 4. He really got like a 80s graphic look going. It's very thick key lines, very poppy colors. And from here on out, the rest of the boards just kind of followed that formula of writer personality, poppy graphics, poppy colors. And that became NHS's kind of like look and foundation for years and years to come. So here we are at the end of the tour. It's about 89 and 90. A lot of things happened in the 90s, things moved quickly, but frankly we just kind of ran out of room for our museum. There's so much stuff, we couldn't contain it all. But I want to say thank you to Skate Warehouse, and if you guys want to come down and take a free tour, you're always welcome. You just got to go on to the Instagram, the NHS Skate Museum, or go online and book your free tour, and thanks for joining us.